Welcome to this Jeremy Bamber and White House Farm Season 4 podcast. My name is Yvonne Hartley and I am joined tonight by Emma Morris. Hi Emma.
Hi, Yvonne.
Tonight we're going to discuss the lies, as promised, of Julie Mugford. So just as a brief introduction, I'm sure most of you know Julie Mugford was Jeremy's girlfriend at the time of the tragedies. She'd been with him for just short of 2 years by August 1985. Owing to the fact that she discovered that her best friend had a very brief relationship with Jeremy during the course of their courtship, and also due to the fact that Jeremy finished the relationship not long after the tragedies, she started to invent stories about Jeremy in order to have him convicted for the murder of the 5 members of his family. This was purely and simply, we believe, because she was a woman scorned. She had truly believed that Jeremy would be her husband. She had spread lies and rumours for some considerable time that they were engaged, and she'd even pointed out some of the Bamber properties that she intended to live in when they were together. And so, to elaborate on this further, we've decided to put together some cast iron lies, what she can be proven to have been guilty of. So
I think,
I'll hand you over to Emma.
yeah, I think it's worth pointing out as well, in her own words, that she said she smothered Jeremy with a pillow after he dumped her because if he were dead, he would always be with her, which is quite a disturbing thing for somebody to do and say, isn't it?
It's a very disturbing thought to think of, isn't it? That somebody would actually do that. Or even if they did that, to actually tell people that they've done that
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
say,
she's
oh,
really
in
admitted
fact,
that to the
if he's
police as
dead,
well.
no one else can have him. So I tried to smother him with a pillow. And then she told the police that. I mean, surely it shows her as a very unstable character with a lot of um, anger towards Jeremy for finishing with her.
It absolutely does. And I think it might be worth us just saying at this point that we do have another podcast that focuses specifically on Julie Mugford in season 1. So you can go and listen to that, and that will give you more information about Julie and her character and all of that type of thing. But as Yvonne said at the
Yeah.
start, we're going to concentrate on the lies that she told to ultimately help convict Jeremy of murders that he didn't commit. So, Yvonne, can you tell me initially what happened around, obviously, the hitman story that people might be aware of? How did that all come about?
Yeah, well, when Julie was first interviewed by the police, and I'm sure it's because she was just like we say, she was trying to get Jeremy convicted. She's told the police that there was a local mercenary called Matthew MacDonald who Jeremy had employed for the sum of £2,000 to kill the family. Now, it turned out after questioning by the police that this story didn't run its course with them. They interviewed him. They found out they had a cast iron alibi. He wasn't a mercenary, he was a plumber.
Mm,
And that Julie, I think Julie might have wanted to implicate Jeremy, but not actually say, oh, it was him that did it in the first place. And then
yeah,
when that didn't work, she thought, well, what am I going to do now? Oh, they got right. I'll say he did it then. So I
yeah,
think that's what happened. And she said that she'd known about this, and Jeremy discussed it with her for a year. For the whole of 1984,
mm,
Jeremy was supposed to have discussed his plans to burn down the farm and poison the family and all these different methods of
yeah,
killing them all. And it's completely preposterous because had that been the case, would anybody have kept silent? Would anybody still have been with this person who's like trying to, it was she contested seriously going to murder his family? Why would she stay with him?
and then stay with him after he's allegedly done it as well. So this brings us around to the phone calls that were made that night. First of all, I think it's really important that people understand when Jeremy was interviewed by the police and Stan Jones asked him, is there any other way you can prove your whereabouts? Jeremy said, what about the phone records? Stan Jones as we now know, lied to him and said there are no phone records and quickly moved on to another subject. But we know there are phone records because there's extract of calls from Jeremy's house and from White House Farm that were subsequently destroyed by Essex police. So we don't know what those phone calls were, but what we can say is that they had them. So Jeremy either knew that phone calls could be traced, or he believed that they could be traced. So if he had intricate knowledge, so he wasn't calling anyone's bluff here. If he had intricate knowledge, he would know that that was a possibility and the calls could be traced. So he's not going to be stupid enough to be making phone calls from, anywhere. He's going to have to make them from the correct locations. So that means, so Julie Mugford initially said in her original statement, before Jeremy ended their relationship, she said the call was around 3:30. And that accorded with what Jeremy said, it was around 3:30. But afterwards, she changed the time to 3:15 and then again to 3 o'clock. So she's now given 3 different times of that call. So she's lying about 2 of the times at the very least, because there's 3 different times. So if we look at the phone calls in sequence, so bear with here, this will make sense. He calls Julie at 10 o'clock. That's not in dispute. From his house, he'd have to call her from his house because obviously he believes that the calls can be traced. He then at some point travels to White House Farm and he calls his own home phone. So this is the prosecution. This will be the prosecution case. This is assuming that Jeremy's guilty. He would
Emma,
call...
could I just interrupt you there? We know that Neville was seen outside just before 11 o'clock because he was witnessed outside bringing the last harvest in for the evening into the shed. So we know that that hour is not relevant.
It's not relevant. So at some point after that, Jeremy travels to White House Farm unseen, and then he makes a call 3:15 from White House Farm to his home phone to, for the call from Neville to Jeremy. This is what the prosecution would say. He then travels from White House Farm to his home in record speed. Now, we have to bear in mind the fastest the police could do this in broad daylight on a bicycle was 16 minutes. So Jeremy is then travelled and managed to get home in 11 minutes to make what the police say is the 3:26 phone call to the police from Jeremy's house. So
I've got to say, Emma, that his car didn't move all night. Witnesses, his neighbours said his car did not move.
And the police are satisfied that he didn't use his car. So that, the story is he used his mother's bicycle, is the sit up and beg bicycle. So that's all well and good. But then where's he ringing Julie Mugford from? So if we take her earliest time of 3 o'clock, so bear in mind what he says to her is everything's going well at the farm, or there's something wrong at the farm, everything's going well, or something along those lines to indicate ultimately that the murders have happened. Now, he's not going to say that to her while everybody's still alive. So he's got to have already killed everybody by then, right? So if that call happens at 3 o'clock in the morning, he's got to have rang her at 3 o'clock in the morning from his house. Then he's got to have travelled all the way back to White House Farm to ring his own phone from White House Farm at 3:15, then all the way back to his house to call the police at 3:26. That's ridiculous. He's not going to do that and risk getting seen again. And he's not even going to be able to do those timings anyway. And he's going to be knackered. So if we take a second time of 3:15, well, he can't be in 2 places at once. He can't be ringing Julie from his home phone at 3:15 and ringing his home phone from White House Farm. So we know the time had to have been, as both of them originally said, 3:30.
Exactly. But
So
she
if anyone can
changed
make
her
that make
evidence.
sense, write in and let us know.
Yeah, I mean, she changed her evidence multiple times in court because she confused herself, didn't she? She said she gave all 3 times during her court evidence. So the judge, nobody pulled her up. Nobody said, well, wait a minute, you just said 3 o'clock. Why are you now saying 3:30? Nobody pulled her up. So that's the fault of the prosecution and the fault of the defense and the judge that
Yeah.
nobody even picked that up at the trial.
Yeah. And to read his statement, knowing that Jeremy fully believed that you could trace calls, he's not going to be stupid enough to have just randomly made the calls wherever he was. And he's certainly not then going to go and tell the police to look at the phone records because he knows he's going to get, they're going to find the calls and he's going to get caught. So he has to have called at the appropriate locations. So that, does go to show that the call has to have been at 3:30. So she's ultimately lied about receiving those calls and when she received them. The next issue is around what she told the police in terms of what Jeremy had told her. So nothing that she told the police was unique information that you couldn't get from a newspaper. But what's interesting about the information she gave is she gave wrong information that the newspapers had reported.
That's it. The incorrect information that was recorded by the press is the information that she gave to the police. Even regarding entry to the house, even regarding, I mean, their entry to the house changed from one window to another window. The number of shots fired and everything, it was all in the media. But she said that Jeremy had told her these things. And it's another provable lie that while she was in court, she lied again because she was asked in the court if she had ever read any newspapers in relation to the evidence that she gave, and she was quite emphatic and said, "No, we didn't. I didn't read any newspapers whatsoever." Yeah, in a statement dated the 18th of November 1985, she actually admitted that on the following day from the tragedy, so this is now on the 8th of August, that her and Jeremy had gone to the little local village shop where the caravan site was. They were obtained copies of 4 or 5 different newspapers and had taken them back to his house and read through what had been reported in the newspapers. Now, she gave that evidence in her witness statement, but guess what, Emma? The evidence in that statement was edited and redacted from the served copy of her statement. Now, the served copy is the copy that the jury see, that the defense see, and that the judge sees. So they were shown a statement that was her served copy that contained some information, but not all. And this information regarding them getting newspapers on the 8th of August and reading them was redacted. It was not included. So she was then allowed to lie in court to say, "Oh no, I didn't read any newspapers, didn't read anything at all about the case." She did. She'd admitted it in a statement, but the jury, the judge, and then the defense didn't have any knowledge at all of that statement, which is absolutely disgusting because that's Essex police.
I mean, that's really important information as well, because the other thing about it is, we are now to believe that Jeremy provided the exact same wrong information that was then later reported in the newspaper independently of each other. So the newspaper reports, so for example, that Neville was shot 7 times, and Jeremy also erroneously tells her that Neville was shot 7 times, completely independent of each other. Now, and there's obviously other details about where Sheila was found, where the Bible was found, that weren't reported in the newspaper, but were given to Anne Eaton. Some erroneous information about that was given to Anne Eaton, and Anne Eaton gave that information to Julie. And we're supposed to believe that Jeremy, who, according to everybody, is the murderer and would have known exactly where Sheila was found, exactly where the Bible was found, gives her the wrong information that's it. Just so happens to be the exact same wrong information that's independently reported in the newspaper.
Exactly. But I mean, and as well, Essex police are complicit in allowing these lies because anything that cast Julie in a bad light was redacted from her statements. Anything that was seen, oh no, well, maybe that'll be like she was drug dealing. She was guilty of, it's all in the podcast, but she'd been drug dealing.
Mm.
She was guilty of check fraud. She'd imported drugs from abroad. All that the jury didn't get to see because that again was redacted. So anything that put a slur on her character, because Ainsley, who was the DSI at the time, he was the leading police officer. He didn't want her, he didn't want her character blackened in any way. She was like this corrupted, poor little innocent girl, corrupted by Jeremy Bamber, who's this evil, nasty man who'd gone and murdered his family. Poor Julie. Well, no, anything that created her in a bad light was redacted, and the jury, the judge, and the defence didn't get to know anything about that.
No, and they had to
So they
paint
were
her that way because
complicit.
they wanted her believed, because it was her word against Jeremy's ultimately, so they wanted her word believed.
And like the judge said at the trial, if you believe Julie Mugford, then Jeremy is guilty. And if you believe
Exactly.
Jeremy Bamber, then he's innocent. So it's who do you believe? It's what the judge said to the
Yeah,
jury.
and
So
if they'd got all the facts about her history and her character, and actually all the lies that she was telling in court, that might have turned out very differently.
exactly.
So there is one more thing that's really pertinent, isn't there, in terms of proving that Julie Mugford is a liar? Can you tell us about that, Yvonne?
I absolutely will, yes. So this is also at the trial. So this is yet another case of perjury. Julie was asked several times why. She'd already said that Jeremy had been plotting this for a year, and so, they took that as on its face value, did the police. But she was asked specifically at court during the trial. The murders happened on the 7th of August, yet it was the 8th of September before she apparently went forward to the police to give the story that Jeremy had committed the murders.
Yeah.
But she was asked at the trial why she'd waited that month, why hadn't she come forward sooner? And this has always been sort of a thing in a lot of books and everything, or was she scared of him and things like that. But she actually told the trial in her evidence that if, this is her words, that she would have told people if I was in anybody else's company, I could say something. But she said she had not been in anybody else's company without Jeremy being present.
Right.
So,
Okay.
on every occasion since the 7th of August, she was never on her own with anybody. Lie. And we can prove that because on 4 occasions she was on her own with Anne Eaton. So when she went to the mortuary, when they went to order flowers for the funeral, when they were preparing food for the wake and everything, and when she was going out just in general in Anne Eaton's house. They also went to Eastbourne, as people will know, a few days after the tragedies, and with friends called Andy and Karen Bishop. Now, part of the journey, they went in 2 cars, and in part of that journey, that Julie was in the car with either Andy or Karen on her own for a certain degree of the length of the journey, said nothing. One interesting one came to light during an interview in 2010 with David James Smith, with David Beauflower. Now, David Beauflower, who is Jeremy's cousin, said that Julie had gone to the pub to collect some food with him. This is on the night of the 7th of August. So these tragedies have just happened. Everybody is distraught. Yeah, Julie, if what she's saying is true, could see what effect this had on the family, who were apparently distraught. And he told David James Smith that when they went for the food, she had all that time to tell me something was wrong, and she didn't. So Julie Mugford has lied. She was with people. She had ample opportunity. She was also with police officers who were at the properties and everything. She never said a word. And why
What
didn't
about
she
at the
say?
morgue as well?
Exactly,
She
exactly.
could have said, she wouldn't have been, they wouldn't have just let her walk in and view the bodies
There
on
were
her own. There would have
mortuary
been
attendants
yeah,
there, and I mean she just kept absolutely. If that would have happened, how she said that she'd known that her boyfriend had murdered his entire family, surely anybody even if they didn't consciously want to say something physically, they'd give off an indication that something was amiss.
Well, absolutely. And she said she didn't because she didn't have the opportunity. It wasn't that she said, I felt, paralyzed with fear and
No,
I didn't want to admit it. I was trying to block it all out. She didn't say any of that. She said
no,
she didn't say anything because she didn't have the opportunity because she wasn't alone with anyone, where clearly she was alone with a hell of a lot of people and she could have said it at
exactly,
any time. She could have said it when she was viewing those two little boys lying on the mortuary table, but she didn't.
exactly.
And she
But she
didn't
didn't.
because it wasn't true.
Exactly. So, but again, at the trial, nobody pulled her up on that. Nobody said, well, wait a minute,
Well, it didn't
what
sound
about when you went
realistic
here, when you
anyway,
went
does it?
there?
Yeah, I
No.
mean, it really doesn't sound realistic that somebody literally in that entire month and a day
What was
is not,
Jeremy glued to her side for that
yeah,
entire time? It was like, no, he wasn't. What about, it's like when, he's been places and when he went to the accountant to sort out and the solicitors to be able to sort out the farm workers' wages. And he went there with Peter Eaton on the 8th of August to sort out, because the farm workers needed paying, so
mm,
they went to sort out that. And Peter Eaton was made temporary manager of the farm. She was on her own with everybody then in Jeremy's
exactly.
house and said nothing. No, she was, lying at the trial. She tried to paint the picture that Jeremy was glued to her side and didn't give her the opportunity to speak to anybody. That was a complete lie.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think finally, it would be remiss of us not to talk about a real incentive for her to lie. Well, actually, there's a couple of real incentives for her to lie and implicate Jeremy and see it all the way through to a guilty verdict. I think, firstly, Yvonne, if you want to talk us through the charges that were dropped.
Yeah, so obviously we've already spoken about the fact that Jeremy had ended the relationship. So that didn't go down well. Also, Julie had been found to have committed a number of checkbook offences, and it totaled the amount of £850. So that's at least nine checkbook offences, because each check guarantee card in 1985, 1984 only guaranteed the checks up to £50. So
Yeah.
it was an £850 theft against the bank. So she was taken with Stan Jones and Susan Battersby, who had committed the checkbook frauds with her. And they'd spoke to the manager of the Midland Bank. The DPP was aware that she had been found to have committed these acts of theft. And they came to an agreement that they would drop all charges against her if she was to give evidence at the trial against Jeremy. Now, this is very key because Julie was a trainee teacher and she was a teacher training college, and no teacher would want to be seen to have a criminal record. And so she would be more than willing to have all those charges dropped in order to give evidence against Jeremy.
Yeah,
So that's the second reason, but there is an even third incentive for Julie to lie, isn't there, Emma?
there is.
Would you like to tell us what it is?
Okay, yes. So Julie Mugford had a deal with the News of the World that they would pay her £25,000 for her story about Jeremy upon a guilty verdict. So she had £25,000 at stake. If he were to be found not guilty, she's not going to get a penny. And this deal was made pre-trial, or at least during the trial.
Yeah, it was actually made before the trial. Her solicitors made an agreement with the News of the World. Now, he said it was to stop all the press approaching her for who wanted her story. So once he said there's a deal in place, then other press associations aren't going to approach her because he's saying, no, there's already a deal in place, so go away. So that was well before the trial.
Right. So £25,000 is what she was paid ultimately upon Jeremy's guilty verdict.
But
And
only
that's
a
something
guilty verdict.
only upon a guilty. Well, nobody'd be interested in her story if he was found not guilty anyway, would they,
But
really? But
Interestingly, Emma, her Stan and Stan Jones were waiting in a hotel room with the News of the World reporters waiting for the verdict.
Yeah. In a negligee.
In her negligee, where
I
there's
know.
photographs of her in the newspaper with
Yeah.
her interview in a half-dressed state.
Utterly bizarre, completely wrong, and something the jury should have
I
been
mean, she
fully
didn't look
aware of.
like a very distressed, manipulated, coercively controlled person
No,
controlled by Jeremy, did she, in those photographs? No.
no, she certainly did not. So hopefully, with the information we've provided tonight, it just shows that it's really indisputable that Julie Mugford was an absolute liar.
And we've explained the reasons why she lied as well. So
Exactly.
yeah,
And
but if anybody's any questions, of course, or there's any issues we haven't raised about her, or they're not contained in the specific Julie Mugford podcast, what Emma mentioned earlier, then please do get in touch with us, ask us your questions, and we can rectify those on the TikTok or through the website or through Facebook.
we can indeed. Excellent. Well, thank you for chatting with me tonight, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Emma. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
With 108 published episodes of the Jeremy Bamber and White House Farm podcast now available, we've decided not to continue uploading regularly. We've covered a wide range of case topics, including case facts, forensic evidence, and key characters involved in Jeremy's case, in order to get the truth widely known in the public domain. We also discuss other miscarriages of justice and included many different speakers. However, this podcast will still be available to listen to on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. We will occasionally post special editions when there are new, exciting case events and important legal updates. Jeremy and the team want to say thanks for all the many thousands of listeners since we began in February 2021.